Tommy by Rudyard Kipling. I went into a public house to get a pint of beer. The publican, he up and says, "We serve no redcoats here." The girls behind the bar, they laugh and giggle fit to die. I outs into the streets again, and to myself says I, "Oh, it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy go away." But it's "Thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. The band begins to play, my boys, the band begins to play. Oh, it's "Thank you, Mr. Atkins," when the band begins to play. I went into a theater, as sober as can be. They gave a drunk civilian room, but hadn't none for me. They sent me to the gallery and round the music halls. But when it comes to fighting, Lord, they'll shove me in the stalls. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy wait outside. But it's special train for Atkins when the trooper's on the tide. The troop ship's on the tide, my boys, the troop ship's on the tide. Oh, it's special train for Atkins when the trooper's on the tide. A making mock of uniforms that guard you while you sleep is cheaper than them uniforms, and they're starvation cheap. And hustling drunken sodgers when they're going at large a bit is 5 times better business than parading in full kit. Then it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy, how's your soul? But it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. The drums begin to roll, my boys, the drums begin to roll, but it's thin red line of heroes when the drums begin to roll. We ain't no thin red heroes, nor we ain't no blackguards too, but single men in barracks most remarkable like you. And if sometimes our conduct isn't all your fancy paints, why, single men in barracks don't grow into plaster saints. While it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and Tommy fall behind, but it's pleased to walk in front, sir, when there's trouble in the wind. There's trouble in the wind, my boys, there's trouble in the wind, but it's pleased to walk in front, sir, when there's trouble in the wind. You talk of better food for us, and schools and fires and all. We'll wait for extra rations if you treat us rational. Don't mess about the cookroom slops, but prove it to our face. The widow's uniform is not the soldier man's disgrace. For it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and check him out, the brute. But it's savior of his country when the guns begin to shoot. And it's Tommy this and Tommy that, and anything you please. And Tommy ain't a bloomin' fool. You bet that Tommy sees. Now, this is a great poem, especially for the soldiers and the veterans. I love this. There's a couple of notes to go in the first verse. Public house and publican. This would have been an ale house or tavern. A publican would be the proprietor or owner of a public house. And a public house would be, as I said, tavern, ale house, something like that. So he goes into the ale house to get a drink, and they kick him out because he's a soldier. He goes to a theater, and while all the drunken civilians are there, he's kicked out, sent to the gallery, which would have been the high seat where you can barely see the stage. And then he talks about the making mock of uniforms. And one of my favorite lines in this is, well, you have it in the third verse, the refrain there, Tommy, how's your soul? And then the prove it to our face, the widow's uniform is not the soldier man's disgrace. So in the Christian era, there has been frequent belief that soldiers, because they kill, are all condemned to hell. And you can see this also in his poem of Gungadeen, where he ends it where, you'll be squatting on the coals, giving drinks to poor damn souls, and I'll get a swig in hell from Gungadeen. So yes, it was a common belief. And Rudyard Kipling is kind of pushing against this. We're not evil men. We're just doing what needs to be done. We're doing our job as best as we can. And if you'll treat us like normal people, we'll be happy. Because the widow's uniform is not the soldier man's. That is just a powerful line to me. But anyways, let us talk a little bit about poetic form here. First of all, This is 5 verses long. Each verse ends with a refrain, or what we might call in music a chorus. And that's that. It's Tommy this and Tommy that. And they're different, each one, but they have the same basic structure, except the last one, which is a common literary technique to signal the ending of the poem. This verse, being different in its refrain, tells us that there will be nothing after it. That's a fairly common poetic device there. Now, speaking of meter and form here, this poem uses iambic meter. Iambic meter is unstressed and then stressed. I'll get more into detail in meter a little later on. The two most common meter. See, meter is just a pattern of stresses and stressed and unstressed syllables. If we're talking about classical languages like Spanish, French, those guys, they're more long and short languages. I think classical languages are also like Greek. But in English, it's stressed and unstressed. And the two most common are the iamb, which is unstressed followed by stressed, and its opposite, the trochee, which is stressed followed by unstressed. This one is iambic. It also has 14 syllables total. Since an iambic foot has 2 syllables, unstressed, stressed, 14 syllables means we have 7 metric feet. This is 7 iambic feet, or what we call iambic heptameter. So that is the basic form of this poem. It is written in iambic heptameter. It is also written in a basic rhyming couplet, meaning every two lines rhyme. There is one special note here. In the refrain, this pattern of iambic heptameter is disrupted. The first, second, and fourth line of the refrain has 15 syllables instead of 14. The third one still has 14, but the other 3 have 15. And what this is called a catalectic line, meaning it has an extra syllable or an incomplete metric foot. And this is usually done to emphasize something. And because it is used in this way, because the final refrain in verse 4, in the fifth verse, the final refrain, all 4 lines have this catalectic lines. This is another way of emphasizing the end of the poem. So it still follows the same basic pattern. We have the iambic heptameter in all 5 verses. In the 5 refrains, 4 of them have catalectic lines and 1 natural line, or what's called, I believe, it's called acatalectic, is normal. And then the last one has 4 catalectic lines, giving further emphasis to this last verse. And if you listen to it, you should go back and listen to it again and see what I'm talking about. Now, it actually does make that final refrain more powerful in its reading. When you read it, there's more force in it. The other ones are all, because they follow the same pattern, they kind of become repetitious. But when we get this, it kind of it drives that home a little bit more with that change. But this is just a very simple video, so I'm leaving it here, and I'll try to get another poetic video out next week. See you then.